Ooh.
Ooh.
Every time I hear you join, I can't help but be like, ooh, it works.
We still need to work on this introduction.
That's my bad, every single time.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Witchy Weirdos. I'm Hannah.
I'm Tiffany.
And today we are talking witches.
Oh, I'm so excited. I can't even begin to tell you.
Like, this is such a good topic. I feel like this is a nice little relaxing topic.
Definitely. I do feel like we need to preface it with, like, we don't know everything or anywhere near everything.
In fact, we barely know anything.
Yeah, we barely know anything. So if we're upsetting some of you, or anyone that comes across this, we're very sorry. Please reach out. Please educate us. Yeah, go for it. We're very interested. We've done our own research, and we're still starting this journey, so we don't really know anything. We're kind of just gonna loosely talk and hope that we're kind of correct.
And bring you guys along for the ride.
Yeah. So, Witches 101. I feel like this should be like a cute little lecture series, I'm not gonna lie.
The 101 series.
The 101 series. So, what are witches? I think that's probably a good place to start.
I would say so.
Yeah, let's start from the beginning. So there are many perceptions of witches, and that's through like pop culture and history. There's loads of different ways that witches have been presented. And originally, witches were perceived to be evil by early Christians in Europe, and that's kind of what inspired the iconic like Halloween figure of a witch. The typical like crone image of like a bent over older lady, warts and that all of that, like that all came from early Christianity. And then of course we've seen later adaptations. We've seen like Sabrina, we've seen Charmed, slightly different portrayals, and I think witches have quite a prominent pop culture standing at the moment. Loads of people are interested. Yeah, if you go on any social media, you can find loads of people who practice some form of I want to say witchcraft, but it's kind of
an outdated like, kind of like the Wiccan herbal astrological kind of standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's loads of different perceptions of witches. The actual origin of witches. So early witches were people who practiced witchcraft, using magic spells, calling upon spirits, and that was all about asking for help or bringing about change. Most witches were thought to be pagans. So that's paganism is sort of doing the devil's work. That's drawing power from the devil. However, many were simply natural healers, and they're referred to as wise women. That's just, their choice of profession was kind of misunderstood. And once again, it kind of comes back to that early Christianity that sort of perceived it as being evil. And one of the earliest records of a witch is actually in the Bible. It's the Book of Samuel, written between 931 BC and 721 BC, so somewhere in the old times.
Very old. I didn't realise it dated back like that far. That's intense.
Yeah. And so that whole thing, it's about the story of King Saul, who sought out the witch of Endor to summon a dead prophet to help him defeat an army. And there's a whole story about it. And that's kind of like where it all sort of began. And from then there was, the Pope, he was like, it's heresy, and that's where a lot of stuff came from. But there's some kind of things to clear up. So there's something called Wicca, there's witchcraft, and there's paganism. There's differences between all of them. I won't go too much into Wicca right now, because I'm sure it's something that will come up in this conversation. But Wicca kind of comes from Gardnerian witches, or Wicca, something like that. And it's basically a practice of Wicca that came about in the 1950s. It has very strong ties to nature, challenges societal norms. There's loads of rituals in that practice as well. So that's kind of what Wicca is. And there's a whole coven, and you have to be initiated. Members can't initiate themselves. It's very, very, very structured. And as you practice, you grow and you learn more about that. So Wicca's it was brought to the public in the 1950s, like I said. There's a great deal of debate about it, especially among the pagan community about whether or not Wicca is the same form of witchcraft as like ancient practices. But regardless, many people use Wicca and witchcraft as terms sort of like interchangeably, and paganism in itself is like an umbrella term used to apply to like a number of different earth-based faiths. So Wicca falls under that heading. Although not all pagans are Wiccan. So all Wiccans are witches, but not all witches are Wiccans.
Oh my lord.
And all Wiccans are pagans, but not all pagans are Wiccans.
Okay.
And some witches are pagans, but some are not. And some pagans practice witchcraft and others don't.
I feel like it's like that moment in Friends where they're like, they don't know we know that they know we know.
Exactly.
Like...
Precisely. That is exactly how I felt doing this. But yeah, that is kind of like sort of like the difference between them all. So yeah, paganism very much traditionally was thought to draw power from the devil, doing devil's bidding. A lot of it now, along with Wicca, is said to be sort of earth-based magic, and witchcraft is sort of practiced. It's like the act of like it's like rituals and spell casting and stuff like that, but it depends who's talking about it and in what context as to what tone it kind of has.
Okay.
It's very interesting. But yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell what witches are. The perception has changed over time, and actually right now, according to a recent census, there's about 70,000 people in the UK that identify as witches.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and there's actually quite a few celebrities as well, like Lana Del Rey.
I can see that.
Azalea Banks, they've admitted to practicing witchcraft.
I love it.
Yeah, and I think it's the University of Edinburgh announced its first ever pagan chaplain. And it's super popular with all of their students as well.
I know Scotland is like super good for stuff like that. Like they do folklore degrees and stuff like that up in Scotland, which is really interesting.
So amazing. But yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's obviously so much history, and really it depends on where you're looking at it in the world as well. There's loads of different legends about where it all came from. But yeah, the earliest I could find was actually the Bible.
See, if they told me that there was witches in the Bible, I would have been a lot more motivated by the whole thing.
Literally same.
That would have been their selling point.
Okay, there are witches. It's great.
It's a fantasy book, realistically.
I love it. But yeah, so there are many, many, many different types of witches.
Oh my god, there are so many.
So many. So I'm going to leave Hannah to sort of enlighten us on that.
So I've picked out a couple that interest me rather than like trying to go down the rabbit hole of telling you every single one. Oh
yeah.
Because otherwise, like we could be here for hours and I still wouldn't cover everyone. But I'm going to take this moment first off to shout out my favourite ASMR artist, the ASMR Witch, because like just that is some good ASMR, and really? I feel like people will appreciate her. So
I will have to look into that.
While we're here and it's appropriate, I'm going to throw that out there. So, types of witches. I feel like before we categorise these, it's kind of important to say that I think a lot of people now are kind of like little tiny baby witches. Like I feel like I would kind of class myself a little bit under that category because of how popular things like crystals and tarot and astrology all are. And these are big components of being a witch in modern society. So I think like that's why it's even more interesting, because so many people pick up on these tiny little elements and are using them. And I just think like secretly we're all witches, clearly.
You're so right. Like it's so embedded in like a lot of the things that we do. And even just like the way, especially women, like the way we all talk to each other a lot of it's all astrology, it's all crystals, it's just all healing.
Just be like one big ass coven. Like that's the way to go.
I'm so with that.
Like Hogwarts, send me my letter. You're missing out on me.
I love it.
You can also take, I'm like clearly going off on tangents today, but at the moment, if you're stuck in isolation, did you know that you can take Hogwarts lessons?
Excuse me?
like you can actually go online and take Hogwarts lessons and things like charms and dark arts and potions.
Are you joking?
It's seriously cool.
I'm Googling this right now.
I'd tell you where, but I cannot for the life of me remember what it's called. But
oh my god.
It's pretty cool. So, you know, if you're wanting to dabble into the Harry Potter world of witchcraft, we've got you covered.
It's called hogwartsishere.com.
There we go.
Oh my god, Defense Against
honestly,
the Dark Arts 101.
And you like start in year 1 and have to progress up to your final year, like honestly, if you need something to do, that's your starting point. Right, I've gone off on another tangent.
But I love it.
So let's start with our Hogwarts witches and wizards, which would be the traditional style of witch.
Mm-hmm.
So traditional witches kind of come under the category of having the ancestors and the historical element of witchcraft. So these are kind of people who will have grown up with witches in their family or have some connection to things like to magic and stuff in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of ancestors, there's a lot of folklore associated with traditional witches. I think this is really interesting, especially because in England, we are a really old country.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it's quite hard for people probably not to have some sort of ancestral folklore associated with them.
Yeah.
And, you know, I feel like, so I've got Scottish history in me, and I think if you looked back enough into my history, there'd definitely be some, like, Scottish elements in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people would be able to kind of pick up on that. So these traditional witches kind of follow the traditional potions and creating spells. They will tend to have like a book of shadows that might have been passed down from generations.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a lot of kind of like natural elements in there, but they will follow a very traditional style, which is quite cool. And it's quite like a blanket umbrella term again. Like, it covers a lot of different things, and a lot of stuff goes into being a traditional witch that then can be separated into these other categories we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't see my hands right now, but there are some serious hand movements going on as I'm trying to explain these.
I'm so excited.
So, the next type of witch I'm going to talk about is a sea witch. And I think this is so cool. And I'm not talking like Ursula, I'm talking like there are ties to water, like Moana-esque.
This, honestly, sea witches, there's something about it. Just, oh,
I know. I feel like there's so many of these different types that I just connect with so much.
Mm-hmm.
And sea witch is definitely one. Like, there is something so magical about the water and what like the sea and stuff can hold. Like, it's so interesting.
And there's something so healing about water as well.
It's
like,
so
even
calming.
Even just like taking a bath or something, like it for me like completely recharges me.
Oh my gosh, definitely. So sea witches, like I said, have the ties to water, and they tend to focus their spells and kind of magical practice around things to do with the water. So this would include stuff like shells and driftwood and like being around that kind of water element kind of thing. So it's quite based on the elements. Like, I think you can kind of see a running theme with a lot of these different kind of witches where they are based on like water, earth kind of thing. And so there's definitely this element there that has to be explored. And, you know, it's cool. I think a sea witch would be amazing to be.
Yeah.
Like, I could so see it. And like, again, there's something really magical about driftwood and the way that there's so much, like, the sea beats it down and changes it into what it is. And there's a lot of history there. I just think super cool for kind of getting your spell on.
Definitely.
And so the next one we're going to talk about is kitchen witches.
Oh my god, yeah.
And I think kitchen witches are a lot of like modern day baby witches kind of fall under this category. I see a lot of people say that it's a really good place to start if you're interested in becoming a witch. Because it is very adapted to modern society. So, as you can imagine with the name Kitchen Witch, it's suggested that magic is created in the kitchen. And I'm not just talking about baking like a good quality cake, because
I mean, that is magic.
Yeah. But they kind of suggest that you use different elements within kind of cooking and brewing, especially like teas are a big thing in kitchen witches. And I think that's awesome. Like, who doesn't love a good herbal tea?
Mm-hmm.
So they will cook and brew with herbs, essential oils. They will kind of do spells and rituals and put their energy into the things that they create in the kitchen, which I think, again, is kind of accessible to everyone. Like, it encourages you to be able to kind of like use your energy and your spells and make things that you can then consume yourself or pass on to others. And I think it has quite a nice like sharing quality to it. And I do want to just throw a little thing in here as well, that I saw someone, I think it probably was the ASMR Witchler, that said that it's really important when you are doing things to do with magic that it is consensual. So, you know, you can send out your good energy and good vibes to people. That's absolutely fine. But it's really important that you are not doing spells and you are not doing magic on people unless they've expressed that they are happy for you to do so.
Yeah.
So I think that's just important to kind of throw in here with the kitchen witch element. You know, it might seem like a really good idea to brew yourself a little love potion and pass it off to the one you love, but do be really considerate of their beliefs and what they think. And, you know, you might think it's a nice, like, calming thing that you're doing, but, you know, especially if they come from a different religious background, that could actually be really upsetting or dangerous for them. So worth considering when we're talking about doing your own little bits of spells and stuff.
Yeah, that's really important.
So hedge witches are our next one. And head witches, it's really hard to say that. Do you think that's why like the owl in Harry Potter is called Hedwig? Head witch. It's quite tricky to say. Apparently I'm just talking about Harry Potter today as well. So hedge witches, I'm just going to call them hedge because I can't say it. So hedges, they are more of the spiritual kind of witches. So when you are a hedge witch, oh my god,
you've got it, you're nailing it.
It's a lot about venturing into other worlds and other realms, which is kind of a little bit on the scarier side. I think this is quite like an invasive style of being a witch because it requires a lot of your energy. So it's essentially centered a lot around the spiritual world and astral projection and kind of contacting those ancestors from your past. Again, that kind of element.
Yeah.
But it's things like spirit guides are big within these kind of this area, and also like reaching out and contacting those spirits. So I think this is kind of where you'd come into the imagery of witches using things like Ouija boards, because they are there to contact other people.
Yeah.
Which is it's scary, but it's very cool as well. And I think
definitely.
when you see things like pendulums being used to contact other spirits, I think this would come under this category again as well. And I'm sure the thing with being a hedge witch versus someone who's just, you know, trying to contact the spirit world is there'll be a ritual and guidance on how to do this safely. So actually it is probably the better way to go around trying to make that connection, because you're going to do it in a way that's been explored and investigated. So just a wise word of wisdom.
Safety first.
And hedge witches also really focus on the use of herbs and earth magic. So you can kind of see the running theme that herbs and being connected to the earth are massive in terms of being a witch. It's, you know, witches do tend to, and I think a lot of us as well at the moment, identify with the fact that there's a lot of energy in us and there's a lot of energy in the world. And you can harness and you can create with the energy of the world to like bring up frequencies and to work on other energies, and it's just super exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
So I have 3 more we're going to talk about, because as you can see, like it's taken me a while to just get through those 4. So the next one is an elemental witch, and I think this is awesome. I think it's really cool how you, like, this has got to have some sort of really fascinating history behind it. I'm sure if I looked into it like a further in depth, it would go back to kind of more like other cultures and stuff as well, because the elements are big in so much folklore and so much of different like religions and kind of spiritual understandings. So obviously the 4 elements we've got are water, air, fire and earth, and it took me a really long time to try and say those and not just like repeat the same ones.
Yep.
And so when you're an elemental witch, you focus on honouring the elements within your spells. And again, I think this is, you know, you could kind of look at elemental and then break it down into things like being a sea witch and being like a green witch and a cosmic witch, which we're going to talk about in a second, because they're all those elements that you then focus on and specify in a little bit more. So it is fascinating. The 4 elements have a lot around them to be used.
Yeah.
And I think, again, like there's a lot out there about the elements and how they influence us. And, you know, even in astrology, elements are a big thing. You know, like they define who you are depending on where they sit in your charts. So, you know, there's a lot in that category. And one of those could probably be branched down into being a green witch. And I think green witches are so cute. And again, I think a lot of us, if we are buying houseplants and like essential oils and stuff like that to try and keep us sane, aka us, then I think we do sort of have that green witch underlying element in us. And I think we could easily explore that further. It's quite cool to know that we've got like a basis that we could work on here if we wanted to go down that route.
You're so right.
So a green witch basically states that they are connected to Earth and the processes of Mother Earth. And I just love that. Like,
that's so sweet.
I think we can really see that the way the world is and how the health of the world affects people. I think like it's really been seen recently, especially.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are so many health benefits to plants. Like, it's crazy the way that having houseplants in your house can improve you. And I don't know, like, about you, but sometimes if I'm having, like, I find it in summer especially, if I've seen too much dryness and the world's been too hot for a while, I need to just be surrounded by trees.
Yeah.
Like, there's something so incredible about the way that they make me feel. And I think that is why this kind of is developed. So green witches tend to grow and study plants and then use their plants within their spells. So an example of this I saw from I think like she even might be called the Green Witch on YouTube, but she so she would manifest her spells by writing these spells down, and then she would fold them up and she would plant them in the bottom of her compost with kind of like a plant that would relate to what she's trying to do. In fact, I saw this because she did one around kind of looking out for everyone during this tricky time. And it's just a really nice way of kind of connecting those two things together and using that to kind of manifest your spell.
That's really sweet.
And then finally, we're going to talk about cosmic witches. And again, I think this comes under the thing where everyone has a, like, if you're interested in astrology, you've got a nice basis to kind of build upon this. So cosmic witches focus on the cosmos, astrology, and astronomy, which is super cool. Like, I just hit my elbow. I got too excited. So obviously, like, there is a big movement at the moment around astrology and how different signs affect us and the planets and everything like that. And I don't know if I did mention, like, for me, this is something I connect to a lot because of my ideology of, you know, the stars being our souls and things like that. So I see this as a really significant type of witchcraft. So again, it focuses on celestial energy, and you base your spells around astrological placements. So this is very cool. It's moon cycles are quite influenced in this as well. So you kind of determine how you do your spells based on what the universe is looking like in that moment. And you might, if there's a specific spell you want to do, you would probably save it for a time that relates to the spell. So it's very cool, and I think there is something so magical about how vast, and I guess in a similar way to the sea, how vast and unknown the sea and the sky is. And I think that gives us a lot of space to be able to explore what that energy could do for us. So they are my types of witches I'm going to talk about. There are so many more.
Mad.
So, like, we could go into this again at some point, but yeah, they are the basic ones that I wanted to discuss today.
So cool. I think definitely like a deep dive on some of them would be really,
it would be
really
cool to like go back in history and explore them and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of history,
natural segue.
A natural segue. So obviously we talked a little bit about what witches are and the different types, and you know where they kind of the first like known origins of them. But I think you can't really talk in general about witches without acknowledging some of the very horrific things that have been done. And I'm just going to kind of exclusively talk about the UK here, obviously because that's where we are. But yeah,
we don't need to go down into America. That's even massive.
No, that will warrant a whole podcast just for itself. But I think it'll be interesting to talk a little bit about witch hysteria. It's dubbed.
I like that.
Yeah. So witch hysteria, this kind of is sort of used to represent the kind of feeling around the witch trials and some of the people that were heavily pursuing witches at that point. And kind of where witch hysteria came from was two books, really. The Malleus Maleficarum, something like that, and the Compendium Maleficarum as well. And so witch hysteria, as it was, it took hold in Europe mid-1400s, and so many people were accused of being witches, often under torture.
God.
Yeah, it was absolutely horrendous. And witch hunts were very common, and most of the accused were executed by burning at the stake or hanging. And this often tended to be single women, widows, or other women sort of on the margins of society.
Of course.
They were typically targeted. Obviously, you know, defenseless women, basically. And between the years of 1500 and 1660, up to 80,000 suspected witches were put to death in Europe.
I didn't realise it was like that big of a number. That's insane.
Yeah. And 80% of them were women thought to be in cahoots with the devil and filled with lust. God forbid.
Good old lust. Getting us into trouble.
God forbid. And actually, very interestingly, Germany had the highest witchcraft execution rate, and Ireland had the lowest.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah. So the publication of the Malleus Maleficarum was written by two German Dominicans in 1486, and that was kind of what spurred witch hysteria. It's what made the mania go viral, so to speak, in those days. Not viral as an internet viral.
It's not like trending.
Yeah, no. But kind of translated, Malleus Maleficarum is kind of, it means sort of like the hammer of witches. And it was essentially a guide on how to identify, hunt, and interrogate witches. God. It was, and the Compendium Maleficarum that followed that in 1608, which was published in Italy, was like a witch hunter's manual, basically.
God.
It was written in Latin, and it discusses the witch's pacts with the devil and detailed descriptions of witches' powers and potions.
Sounds quite useful.
I mean, kind of,
It's got the spells in it. It's like devil stuff, not so much, but the spells, useful.
Definitely. But yeah, it also contained a classification of demons, and what demons were, very interestingly. So that is kind of what sparked witch hysteria. Witchcraft wasn't made a capital offence in Britain until 1563. So it was after Malleus Maleficarum, but before Compendium Maleficarum.
I can't believe how well you're nailing these words.
I am so proud of myself. Someone's so going to come along and be like, you butchered that. And I'm going to be like,
It sounds good. It sounds good. That's all that matters.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, so witchcraft was not made a capital offence in Britain until 1563. Although it was deemed heresy and denounced as such by the Pope in 1484.
Oh,
so from 1484 until around 1750, some like 200,000 witches were tortured, burned, or hanged in Western Europe. Gross.
That's just horrible, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there was a 14-month period in East Anglia that's dubbed witch fever. It was between 1645 and 1646, where basically a bunch of anti-Catholics were sort of swayed by a bunch of preachers to seek out even the smallest whiff of heresy, they called it. And there was a man called Matthew Hopkins. He was a crappy lawyer, basically. And to all of these people, he'd come to the rescue, you know, this guy. Oh, my God, disgusting. He became known as the Witchfinder General.
Oh, I've heard that name before. That rings a bell.
Yeah. So that was Matthew Hopkins. He basically came to all of these idiot anti-Catholics who were being swayed to seek out witches. And he became, like, their leader. And he had 68 people put to death in Edmonds alone, 19 hanged at Chelmsford in a single day.
Oh my God.
And after that, he set off to Norfolk and Suffolk, and he was paid £6 a day for clearing towns of witches.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think it, like, in today's wage, it would have been like 2.5p. But, you know, at the time it was,
Profits are a profit.
Yeah. So a lot of what Hopkins theorised was deduced on the devil's mark. So he would look for a wart or a mole or like a flea's bite, and he would say it was the devil's mark, and he would use a jabbing needle to see if these, literally he would just poke them with a 3-inch long spike, and it was in like a spring-loaded handle. So basically,
so it's just like a poking device, like a
the thing is, it was
poking device.
Pretty much, yeah. So he would find these marks and he would poke them with this needle. But the way that the whole device was set up is kind of it's sort of designed so that the person using it doesn't feel any pain. And the whole point of the test was, if the woman doesn't feel pain, then she's a witch. But the whole device had been set up so that when it was used,
sneaky,
you didn't feel pain. Yeah, exactly. And obviously there were other tests for witches as well. Mary Sutton of Bedford. I think she was one of the first to be put to the swimming test. Oh, this is where her thumbs were tied to her opposite toes and she was put in the river. And this is the most stupid thing ever, is, you know, if they float, they're guilty. If you sink, you're innocent. But if you sink, you're going to die anyway. These people are so dumb. If you have oxygen in your lungs, you are going to float.
It's just ridiculous.
It's the most ridiculous thing. But yeah, that was the float test. So there was the stupid poker mole and do I have air in my lungs test.
Basically set up to make you fail no matter what, really.
Pretty much, absolutely. And so this is kind of like regarded as like the Hopkins reign of terror. And the last reminder of it was actually discovered in Essex in 1921, where 2 female skeletons were found in a garden, pinned to unmarked graves with iron rivets driven through their joints. God. Yeah, and that was done to make sure that a witch couldn't return from the grave.
Oh God, that's horrendous.
Yeah, and Hopkins alone is responsible for approximately 300 executions. That's just him alone. There's one very interesting family, the Pendle witches, and that was in August 1612. The Pendle witches, it's 3 generations of witches in one family, were marched through the streets of Lancaster and hanged. And that's like there's loads and loads of research on the Pendle witches. It's really interesting, but very, very sad.
I can imagine.
So many of the sort of acts against witchcraft were repealed in 1736, but witch hunts still went on. So in 1863, an alleged male witch was drowned in a pond in Essex. And in 1945, the body of an elderly farm labourer was found in the village Meon Hill in Warwickshire. And his throat had been cut and his corpse was pinned to the earth with a pitchfork.
Oh, God. Wait, not 1945?
So, yeah, 1945.
Oh my God, that's so recent.
To this day, the murder's unsolved. Yeah, and he was... well, this is the thing. So the murder's unsolved, but locally to that town, he was reported to be a wizard.
So it's kind of like a hate crime, essentially, isn't it? Like, they've established...
It is a hate crime, yeah.
What his... Like, even if it's not, but true, but established it and then acted out on that, taking the law into their own hands, like...
Literally. I mean, that was kind of like exactly what happened throughout all of this, through this whole witch hysteria. So Europe in general, like I said, 80,000 suspected witches put to death. And that's in the whole of Europe, which is
insane.
Horrific. It's absolutely horrific. But like I said, the most recent census, as many as 70,000 people now identify as witches.
That's quite nice, isn't it?
It's quite nice. It's nowhere near what was, potentially lost, whether or not those people did in fact identify as witches or not. Like I said, a lot of this points to people just sort of like on the outskirts of society being targeted just because they were alone.
Outsiders are always the target of persecution, aren't they?
Precisely, yeah. And I think if you look into a lot of different cultures about where, if we looked into like the Salem witch trials and stuff, I'm sure we would see a lot of that as well. And we should definitely do that. We should definitely look into it at some point because it's like
mad. A consistent,
absolutely mad
hysteria, isn't it? Like no matter where you look, this hysteria did occur.
I think that's what really points some truth to this in me, because like there are certain things in the world that kind of transcend all cultural boundaries, and it's reported all over the world, no matter who you are or what where you're from or what language you speak, or even tribes that aren't integrated with normal society or civilization, they have these legends, which to me is a massive sign to like,
there's got to be
clearly something's going on here.
Something that motivates these people to tell these stories and pass it down through generations.
Precisely, which is exactly how I feel about the paranormal in general. I think it can kind of be linked back to that as well. I think if something is transcending, generations and cultures and countries and thousands of years, like biblical times, there has to be something in that. There has to be. So yeah, that's kind of some of the stuff that went down in the UK and in Europe. It's horrendous,
awful.
Really.
Truly awful.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that feels quite heavy.
Sorry. But like I said, recently, that most recent census, it's really, really interesting. Loads and loads of people do identify as witches. And with some celebrities as well saying that, like I can completely see it, with universities opening up different chaplains for it, with social media being such a big thing. I think you're right. I think you very much hit the nail on the head when you were like, there's loads of baby witches, and I think like there's so much information out there that people are exposed to so much that we have and we have all of these really small ties to it, but nobody has sort of I'm sure if you directed your energy at like one of them, so if I turned around and was like, I'm really going to focus on what it would mean to be a cosmic witch, or I'm going to be like, okay, I'm really going to try and work with like this deity or something, like I'm really going to go to meditate and like really think about it and try and work with these gods and stuff, and like if you really, really wanted to do it, I think you could. It's just so interesting that you're right with like baby witches, because there's so many different things that are like embedded in our culture. It's like those things have just like become normal.
Just accept it. And actually these are big things that have come from witches of the past.
Precisely. It's like we're kind of watered down witches in a way.
I love that. I also think as well, like there's quite a peacefulness to being a witch in current society. Like there aren't any expectations there, like there aren't books that dictate how you have to act in a certain way. You kind of adapt it for who you are. And I think in terms of things like sexuality, it's kind of like the safest sort of religion you can practice, because, you know, it's one of the few religions that isn't anti it and isn't kind of trying to say you have to be a certain person in order to be able to be this. And I think that's why it's quite appealing for a lot of people, because it's kind of safe in a sense now, and it wasn't then. And I think it's probably done the biggest like 180 flip from where it was before to being this kind of inclusive practice. I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's very accessible for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's completely right. And then, of course, like with there being so many different types, that inherently makes it even more accessible, because someone could really, you know, feel a strong connection to the earth, and they'll be like, you know what, I think being around plants, being around, you know, nature, I think I'm an earth witch, or like I think I'm a green witch, sorry. And like, we're like, you know, we're really into like astrology and stuff, you know, I could be like, actually, maybe that's where my strength is. Maybe that's where that is. And you can kind of
build on it and think, actually, I know this stuff about like my sun and moon signs, but, you know, I could incorporate this and think about using it to create spells. It's just like, you have that grounds of knowledge, don't you?
I definitely think something I would really like to try a bit more is spellcasting. I think I would really like to find something that works for me and sort of like play with my manifestation and spells and stuff like that, and kind of figure that out.
I have a little spell for you. Yeah, I thought we'd finish up with a very simple spell, apparently, that is for anxiety, which I think whether
thank you, Hannah.
whether you think this is going to work or not, I don't see there being any harm in trying to help your anxiety. Like,
after the week I've had, you would not
I just
believe.
think, like, and I think this about every religion, like, you don't necessarily have to fully practice it, but I don't see there being any harm in trying to do these things if you need that support. So I have got a little simple anxiety sachet spell that I found. And this is super simple. All you're going to need is a smoky quartz crystal, a rose quartz crystal, lavender and peppermint.
Okay.
Oh, she's got her crystals out. I can hear
it. Hang on. Oh wait, I actually have lavender and peppermint as well.
I don't think I have peppermint. I need to work on getting some peppermint. And so then you're also going to need like a little sachet or a little bag.
You are all coming on an adventure to my kitchen.
Love this.
I have a little plant, a little lavender.
So yeah, you're going to need like a little bag or something to pop them in.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure if you're going to be able to do all of this.
Just give me the rundown, because then I have all of this stuff and I can do it immediately after.
Honestly, so simple. You're going to place all your ingredients in your little sachet, and then you are going to say the affirmation: I move from within, my shine makes me free, I can let go and just be.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to repeat that. I move from within, my shine makes me free, I can let go and just be.
Wow.
And yeah, that is your anxiety sachet spell.
That is so good. Wow, okay.
It's cute, isn't it? It feels very like a nice little simple place to play around with spellcasting a little bit.
Definitely.
And again, like with the fact that a lot of spells do incorporate crystals and gemstones. And actually, again, I think a lot of people just use these daily anyway. Like, I know a lot of people who will carry certain stones in their pockets just for like some luck and support. I know when I took my driving test, I gathered all of like the luck and bravery crystals and gemstones I had those in my pocket, because like I said, you can, like, there's never any harm in trying these things, is there?
So it's so true. Actually reminded me, I had a meeting this week at work that was horrendous. And I literally had a bit of jasper, and jasper's supposed to be really good for grounding, and and emotional stability and dealing with conflict and crisis.
Which is so needed in a work meeting.
This specific one, yes, it was. And I literally had the Jasper and it was already there. And this specific person was, creating chaos. Oh, and I just picked up my Jasper and I was just like twiddling it and I felt so calm. I was like, I'm good.
Just breathe.
I'm good.
Use it.
I can handle this. I'm dealing with this conflict and I'm fine. I'm stable. I am not the chaos in this room.
And I don't know whether it's a bit of like a placebo effect in a sense that you think this stone will do that to you. But even if that's the case, why would you not use it? Like, if it works, then why would you not use this placebo? Whether it's an energy or a placebo, you might as well be using it in your life.
Exactly. I completely agree.
That might be my new quote for life.
I like
Energy or placebo, they're all good for you.
We should make it a t-shirt. We'll have that and then we'll have watered down witches.
Yes. We are watered down witches.
I love it. I really love it. Well,
I think that is everything we were going to cover today.
I think it is. That was a lot more concise than...
We're getting better.
I am proud of us.
We'll get there. Give it a couple more episodes and we'll be like, boom, here we go.
We'll
facts,
be so on
facts,
it, yeah.
facts.
Yeah, well, thank you for listening, people.
Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it too. Yeah, we'll have to think of what we're going to do next week.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Very exciting.
If for some reason anyone actually listens to this and you have any ideas, please let us know. And once again, if we've said something wrong or many things wrong or something you'd like to correct us on or educate us on, let us know.
Or even tell us we are stupid and you don't agree with us, because at least then we know you're listening.
Hell yeah.
We'll fix things. We can take it.
Yeah. We have our crystals. We'll be fine. I have my Jasper for emotional stability. No one worry. Well, I will see you all next week then.
Yes. We will chat again soon.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.